Hello guys, Winston here. Hopefully you can't hear the machining in the background or my laptop about to take off as the fan starts spinning. I'm recording my screen. I'm also speaking live, so we'll see how this goes. I wanted to do a quick session about how I made my all aluminum business card. So I figured I'd go through some of the cam, show you some of the little bits of Fusion trickery that I use to create toolpaths like the adaptive logo. So let's get started and I'll show you how I made this. So design workspace, I started off first by modeling a frame, this little piece, so I could drop in one of my business card blanks in there. So this is 86 millimeters from here to here. And then I think it's 54 from here to here. And then when I machine that out, I add a little negative stock to leave. So this is just a little tiny bit larger so that the blank falls in easily. Now, once I have this shape, what I can do is bring in an SVG. I designed all of this in Affinity Designer. You could also use Inkscape if you're a masochist or illustrator. So the way I did that is I just, on the bottom plane, created a sketch, import SVG on that plane. There we go. Select your SVG file. I had, where's my desktop? I must have deleted it. But just pick an SVG, bring it in, position it however, where is it? Position and scale it however you want. You can figure out the rest. So once I had my design centered where I want it, by the way, in Illustrator I drew in just a bounding box around there so I could align everything. Once I have all this in here, I can go into my manufacturing workspace. I can create a setup for the front, and for the logo, what I'm doing is I'm doing a parallel toolpath that's constrained within this shape. Now the problem with a parallel toolpath is it is a 3D operation, which means it's model aware. You can't just pick contours and say work within here. It needs to reference off hard geometry. So I actually had to model a really shallow pocket that the parallel toolpath could work within. Anytime now. I apologize for the slowness of Fusion. So with this little shallow pocket, I can parallel within that, tell it to avoid here, and it'll just do its magic here. I have this first pass set at 60 degrees so that it looks like well, Fusion likes to do this thing where it deletes my already generated toolpaths. So you can imagine this, but mirrored across the vertical axis to go in this direction. I'll regenerate that later. Let's bring back my sketches. So once I have the YouTube logo, oh my goodness. Once I have the YouTube logo filled in, I would put in the Jeopardy theme here, but that would probably line me up for a copyright strike. Once I have the YouTube logo filled in, I'll go around and trace all of these letters, and I can see that this toolpath has also been completely decimated by Fusion. Once I have that done, I will fill in my name, because this part I want to be a little shinier and just stand out a little more. I'm also going to fill in this little bar here just to separate this from this, and just a little more shininess once you drag engrave this out will look pretty good. Trace around all the large things just to give everything a nice sharp corner and define all the edges, and then fill in just add a little more definition to the Instagram logo, dot your eyes, fill in a little Twitter bird. This actually has a really cool pattern, because in each direction the reflection of light is a little different. So this actually looks pretty cool in person. Like on the card, you just pick up the card and you rotate it a little. It looks nice. And then on the back side, I have a different sketch. And the sketches, you can just pick the outlines and say work within there. This is a 2D adaptive, so nothing too fancy, but you have to do a little trickery here. Because if you use an adaptive with a really tiny end mill, so I've got a placeholder that's like 2 thou. What do you want? Instagram, shut up. So if you have a really tiny end mill, which is what I'm using to generate the toolpaths, you can't actually create an optimal load that's larger than the diameter or the radius of the cutter. So to get like large spaced out arcs, you need the adaptive toolpath to think it's using a larger end mill. So if you do that, if I say I used an 1/8 inch end mill and I run through the toolpath without stock to leave, it's going to just work like within the contours of my logo and not touch the edges, but we want it to go right up to the edge. So we need that negative stock to leave to push the toolpath out to the edges. And so I picked a stock to leave that was just a tiny bit below the radius of the end mill. If you do negative 0.0625, some weird things happen and it doesn't calculate. The cam kernel freaks out, so don't do that. Just a little bit below the radius, that'll be fine. Both ways would also produce an interesting look, but I don't want the lead-ins and lead-outs. Another thing to look out for is your retract height. You got to make sure that when the drag engraving bit finishes an arc, it pulls off far enough that the compression is released completely and the tip does not touch the card. So if you take a look at the toolpath, all of my retract moves bring it above. I have it about 10 thou of compression from this surface that I zero on to the card. And once you have that established, you are pretty much safe. And trace around the logo just to define all the edges, and then a second trace that's just a little bit further out just to thicken up that line. And that is the cam for my aluminum business card. I'll cut to some footage of the machining right about now, and you can see just how it runs through. Overall, really simple, but Fusion is not the ideal tool to use for this. You'd probably want to use VCarve or Aspire. Any of the other like 2D focused programs will just do a better job overall and also run more efficiently, and they won't eat your toolpaths. I don't know, hope this was bearable to watch. I know you can probably hear the mouse clicks and there's long pauses as I wait for Fusion, but yeah. If you want to try this out, let me know. I don't have a recommendation for the drag engraving bit because the company I bought mine from, Benchtop Precision, their website is Foobar, so you're on your own. But go check out the Facebook group, the unofficial Shapeoko Nomad user group, whatever. A bunch of people have tried out different ones. They've shared their experiences. There's a couple out there that are relatively affordable, so go try it out, and hopefully your Fusion is more stable than mine, and you can just play around with it. The benefit of using Fusion is you can do interesting looking toolpaths. I'm trying to celebrate the sort of the machinist side of things, and so I want these toolpaths to resemble actual toolpaths. I don't want like just the basic crosshatch or fill patterns you might get in another 2D cam software. So that's all I wanted to share. Thanks for watching. Good luck. Have fun machining, folks.